Jesus, give me your eyes for the one. Have you noticed, as you've read through the Gospels, how many times Jesus stops to talk to the one? Oh, he always had the crowds around him. He went up on a hillside and the crowd sat around him as he taught to them. And wherever he went, crowds would go, and he fed the 5,000 on one day. He fed the 4,000 on another. There were always crowds, but he often stopped for the one. Sometimes we hear the person's name. It was an important person like Nicodemus, or even a well-known person like Zacchaeus. But oftentimes, it was a seemingly unimportant person. Someone normal, someone unnamed, like the leper, the blind man, the demon-possessed man, the paralytic, the woman who's bent over from some sort of disease that she had. This week, it was a daughter and a woman. See, Jesus had just shown up on the shores, and the crowds were already gathered for him. And so as he gets out of the boat, a man named Jairus, he was important. He was a synagogue leader, a ruler in the local synagogue. And he comes to Jesus and he's like, my daughter is on the brink of death. Would you come and heal her? And Jesus drops everything. It's as if she was the only appointment that he had on his calendar that day. She was the number one thing on his to-do list. He drops everything and he begins to make his way to Jairus' house. And Jesus begins to make his way there. There were crowds, and the crowds were gathered around him. And as he was making his way there, the crowds were moving along through the streets until the interruption. And everything stopped. I'm sure Jairus' heart dropped. He was like, my daughter, we're going to my house to heal my daughter. She's about to die. But Jesus stopped because he noticed some power going out from him. I wonder what that felt like. Oh, what was it that Jesus noticed in him, in his being, that something changed, that everything stopped? And he looks around and there she was, a daughter of someone else, someone's wife. There was this lady who had been afflicted by this disease where her body bled for 12 years. It caused a rift in her family. It caused a rift in her worship. She was no longer able to go to the temple to offer her sacrifices. She was unclean. And her world was wrecked. Her world was rocked. And she had paid everything she had to go to doctors to find a cure. And with each time, she became a little poorer, a little less hopeful, and still uncured. And this day, as Jesus shows up in her town, she's like, if I could just touch his clothes, if I could just touch the hem of his garment, I'll be healed. And so the crowd's there, and she weaves and presses her way through, and she reaches out and she touches his garment, and boom, instantly, she's healed. Jesus felt this power go out from him. Stops everything to focus on this one. Yeah, he still has Jairus' daughter. He still has that one on his mind, but he's going to stop and focus on this one. And he calls her out in a good way. He calls her out to raise her up as an example of faith. He calls her out to encourage her faith, to encourage her faithfulness. He calls her out to restore her to her community and her family again. Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace. Can you imagine hearing those words? That Jesus singled you out of the crowd. And he spoke these words to you. How did she lead differently that day? Meanwhile, over here, remember, Jairus, he is freaking out. He is panicking because his daughter is still on the brink of death. And then comes the word no parent wants to hear. your daughter has died. Leave Jesus alone now. And Jesus says, we'll have none of that. If you believe, she will be healed. If you believe, she will be healed. And we don't hear Jairus' response, but they begin to make their way there. So Jairus holds out hope that Jesus can change the situation. They show up, and the mourners are already there, and they are crying and they are wailing, as was the custom. And Jesus says, why are y'all here? She's not dead, she's but asleep. And they laugh at him. Can you imagine the audacity of people to laugh at Jesus? And he takes mom and dad up to her room. He brings along Peter, James, and John, and there, with the simple touch of his hand, a child, arise. Death is chased away. Death is defeated in her life for just this moment. And she's restored to her mother and father again. Jesus had a lot of places to go. He had a lot of people to see. He had a lot of lessons to teach. He had a lot of things to do. But Jesus always had time for the one and one more. Whenever we see Jesus going along the way, we see these little snippets from time to time, conversations, interactions, not necessarily with a group, but with the one. And so may our prayer today be that Jesus would give us his eyes for the one.